both will lie.
Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C-Dot that knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. In my opinion, Filmation is probably one of the few studios that is important for giving us a lot of our modern pop culture. Not only did they help in creating one of the first toy-based cartoon series of the 80s, but they were also the first to create a few TV series based off of some of our favorite superheroes. But sadly, by the late 80s, this was when the magic of Filmation was starting to lose its grip. Not only was the company's animation not that impressive compared to what was coming out at the time, but a lot of what was being made from them was the same cartoon just with different settings, like Brave Star or Black Star. But they did try to make two last stands before they had to shut down their doors forever. So join me as I take a look at the last two theatrically made movies of Filmation. The first being the only movie I can watch that stars this character, Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night.
You have heart and soul enough.
The movie was originally planned as part of a series of movies called Filmation's New Classics Collection, which were going to be 13 films that were original sequels to films based on other existing stories, or adapting less popular stories by certain authors like L. Frank Baum. But sadly, this movie and Happily Ever After were the only ones made, as Disney had sued Filmation for copyright infringement as they believed that the movies were ripping off their versions of Pinocchio and Snow White. However, Disney lost the first part of the lawsuit due to the fact that this version of Pinocchio was based closer to the original fairy tale, which was still in the public domain at the time. Unfortunately, this didn't save the movie and was a box office bomb as it only made $3 million against its $10 million budget. Which is a shame because I do think that this movie is not only a good Pinocchio movie, but is, in my opinion, better than the Disney movie. But I'll get into that in just a moment.
You have heart and soul enough.
The movie takes place a year after the original story as Pinocchio, voiced by Scott Grimes, and Geppetto, voiced by Tom Bosley, celebrate his first birthday as a real boy. After an encounter with the Blue Fairy, Geppetto then tasks Pinocchio to deliver a package to the mayor, which leads into a series of events where Pinocchio comes across the villain of the movie, the Emperor of the Night. Can he fend off against this force of evil, or will Pinocchio become a permanent resident of the Empire of the Night?
You have heart and soul enough.
One of the first things about this movie that I like more than the Disney version is the cast. I know that this is a sequel to the original story, but it's nice to see that Pinocchio isn't an insufferable brat like every other movie based on this story, and we get to see the writers take advantage of what he learned from his previous adventures and use his judgment and knowledge in this movie. The other characters range from being entertaining, like Willikers, voiced by Don Knotts, who's a wooden toy that Pinocchio made and is the Jiminy Cricket of the movie, or are downright terrifying, like Puppetino, voiced by William Wyndham, who's the henchman of the main villain, which leads me to the best part of the movie.
You have heart and soul enough.
One of the main reasons that people remember this movie is the main villain, the Emperor of the Night, voiced by legendary actor who voiced Mufasa and Darth Vader, James Earl Jones. He's one of the most underrated villains in any animated movie for his design, and how they write him as the opposite force of the Blue Fairy, voiced by Ricky Lee Jones,
No relation.
who lures children in with all the fun they want, but then steals their freedom and turns them into puppets to perform in his traveling carnival. Which is the second thing that people remember about this movie for how dark it was. I wouldn't call it the darkest animated movie to come out in the 80s, but it's definitely up there with some of the more popular dark animated movies for showing off some pretty disturbing scenes like the horrifying transformation of Pinocchio becoming a puppet again. And it wouldn't be an 80s kids movie without a few songs to copy the Disney formula. But I actually like a lot of the songs. They're all written well and do work for the scenes that they appear in, plus there's only 4 songs in the whole movie, so they don't distract from the rest of the movie for those of you who don't like a lot of musical numbers.
You have heart and soul enough.
There are only 2 negatives I have from this movie. The first are that 3 of the minor characters are really annoying. These are Scalawag, voiced by Ed Asner, and his assistant Igor, voiced by Frank Welker, who are the character equivalents of Honest John and Gideon from the Disney movie. But in this case, they are a raccoon and a monkey, and don't really contribute that much in the movie until the very end, and just makes it more frustrating when you realize that these scenes do make it look like Pinocchio has to relive the lessons he already learned in his first adventure. The other character that didn't do anything was Lieutenant Grumblebee, voiced by Jonathan Harris, who had only 2 roles in the movie. The first was to occasionally help Willikers find Pinocchio in certain scenes, And the other reason he was around was because Filmation was working on a TV series tie-in called Bugsburg. The show was going to be about the lives of the bug people from this movie, including Willikers and the adventures he and Grumblebee would have. The show would have been 65 episodes long and was almost finished with only 2 episodes left to be completed, but the show was scrapped after Filmation went bankrupt and was destroyed when they were bought out by L'Oreal. So yeah, Grumblebee's only contribution to the film was to sell off another product and was only useful in the movie as a horse for Willikers, which leads to the fact that the film does drag a little in the middle of the movie. We get to see Willikers interact with the townspeople of Bugsburg, who he asks to help him find Pinocchio, which leads into wacky shenanigans that don't really add to the story and do drag it on until we see Pinocchio find the ship that the carnival is using to travel. I wouldn't mind this too much if the characters or if this scene went somewhere in the movie, but you can tell that this scene was just a planned series that Filmation was working on, hoping that it would generate more money for them.
You have heart and soul enough.
Despite the fact that this movie drags in the middle and has some issues with the characters, I still think that this movie is worth checking out if you're interested in looking for more obscure dark 80s animated movies. The other characters are likable, the songs are entertaining and memorable enough, and even the animation is a little higher quality than what Filmation was putting out at the time. There's only one downside I have with this movie. This movie is only available on VHS. Yeah, the movie has had no DVD or even Blu-ray release in North America and isn't available on any streaming service that I could find. But luckily for you guys, I found the full movie for free on YouTube that does look like somebody at least enhanced it for today's standards. I'll leave the link to the movie in the description because I do really want people to check this movie out. But with all that said, I'm giving Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night a 7 out of 10. If you want to check out another really great dark 80s animated movie, this might just be up your alley. Thanks for watching, I'm Dr. Waluigi, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover because you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.
You have heart and soul enough. You need them both when life is rough, but nothing works without love. So let love guide your way.
You can do magic with your own 2 hands. You can touch the clouds.